My phone buzzed in my lap. I was sitting in cap and gown, surrounded by cheering families. I looked down, expecting congratulations. Instead, I read, "Don't bother coming home. We've moved on. This family has no room for failures." That was 12 years ago. Last Tuesday, my father was on his knees next to my hospital bed, crying, and I hadn't called him. My name is Callie. I'm 36 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I want to tell you exactly who I was before I tell you who I became. I was the middle child, not the one they introduced first at parties, not the one whose report cards got framed. My older brother was the prized child, the one they always praised, pre-med, polished, and built in my father's exact image. My younger sister was the baby, wrapped in everyone's protection like she was made of something fragile. And then there was me, practical Callie, the one who figured things out quietly and never made a fuss. My father was a rigid man. Image was everything to him. He wanted doctors and lawyers and executives sitting around his dinner table. He wanted a legacy he could describe in one impressive sentence at a cocktail party. I worked 2 jobs through community college. I transferred to a state university. I put myself through a full nursing program without a single dollar from my family. Not one. And when I told my father I wanted to be a nurse, he looked at me like I had said something slightly embarrassing. I wasn't rich, I wasn't the favorite, I wasn't impressive by their standards, but I had something none of them saw coming. I was the one people called when everything fell apart. If your family ever made you feel like your path wasn't good enough, hit that subscribe button right now. Tell me in the comments, what did you build on your own that they never expected? I want to read every single one. Click hype or leave a like and let's keep going. The week I graduated, I had just passed my nursing board exams. I was officially a registered nurse, the first person in my entire family to work directly in healthcare. I remember standing in my studio apartment that morning, holding my license confirmation printout, thinking my father would at least acknowledge it. Not celebrate it, just acknowledge it. I called home. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I took a breath and I said, "Dad, I passed. I'm a registered nurse." There was a pause. Then he said, "That's fine, Callie. Your brother got into Johns Hopkins. We're having a dinner this weekend. You should know the family's focus is there right now." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just stood there holding that piece of paper. I was not invited to the dinner. I found out about it through a Facebook photo. There they were, my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, extended relatives I hadn't seen in years, everyone dressed up, champagne glasses raised, my brother at the center of the frame, grinning. The caption read, "So proud of our family." I stared at that photo for a long time. I texted my father and asked why I wasn't told. 6 hours passed. Nothing. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that sits on your chest. I was still wearing my graduation clothes when my phone finally lit up with his reply. "Don't bother coming home. We've moved on. This family has no room for failures." I read it twice. Then I sat down on the floor right where I was standing. The linoleum was cold through my dress. I remember the faint smell of takeout from earlier that night still hanging in the air. I remember the way the screen of my cracked phone made the words look pixelated, like maybe I was reading them wrong. I wasn't reading them wrong. What broke something deeper in me was not the text. It was my mother. She had seen the exchange. I know she had. And she said nothing. Not one call, not one word of defense. Her silence was not neutral. It was a choice. I made my own choice that night. I would not beg, I would not explain myself. I would not send a message asking what I did wrong, because I already knew the answer. I had not been what they wanted. I blocked my father's number, I packed what mattered into 2 bags, and I decided I was going to build something they would never be able to take credit for. The first 3 years in Denver were hard, in the way that only quiet struggles can be. I worked night shifts in the ICU. I learned to read a patient's vitals the way other people read a room. I got promoted. I made friends who became real family. I built a routine that was mine and nobody else's. Then, in my 3rd year, a distant aunt called me out of nowhere. Her voice was soft and careful. She said, "Callie, I don't know if anyone told you, but your brother got married last month. Big ceremony. The whole family was there." I hadn't been on the guest list. no invitation, no call, not even a text. She said quietly, "Your father told people it would be awkward, that you'd make it about yourself." I laughed, not because it was funny. I laughed because I recognized the shape of what was happening. I wasn't the child who had left. In their version of events, I was the child who had caused a problem, and excluding me was simply good management of that problem. I hung up, made a cup of coffee, and went to my next shift. Year 5 brought my younger sister back into my life, or so I thought. She texted me out of nowhere, saying she missed me, that too much time had passed, that she wanted to have lunch. I was careful, I didn't rush, but I said yes. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. It was a bright afternoon. She looked good. She talked a lot, mostly about the family, about how well things were going, about how my brother's medical practice was growing, and how proud everyone felt. She said, "Mom and Dad finally feel complete, you know?" I nodded and drank my coffee. Then she leaned in slightly and said, almost like she was sharing something kind, "Dad always says you chose a small life. He doesn't mean it badly, he just thought you had more in you." I put my cup down. I paid the check. I told her it was good to see her, and I meant it just enough to say it. But I filed that sentence away. A small life. I kept hearing it on the walk home. That evening, I opened my laptop and started writing. I had no plan for it, I just started. I wrote about the ICU, about what it's like to hold someone's hand when their family can't get there in time, about what it means to be the person in the room that everyone else is too afraid to be. I wrote about estrangement. I wrote about being the child a family quietly decides is too inconvenient to keep. I published it anonymously under a pen name and went to sleep. By morning, it had 300 readers. Within a month, it had thousands. In year 8, my father called me for the first time since the text. I didn't recognize the number at first. When I heard his voice, my whole body stilled. He said, "We miss you, Callie. Family is family. Your brother's practice is going through a rough patch, and you're connected to a good hospital network. You could be a real bridge right now." I understood immediately. This was not a reconciliation call. I was not being reached out to as a daughter. I was being reached out to as a tool. I told him calmly that I couldn't help with that. I kept my voice even. I stayed on the line just long enough to be polite, and when I hung up, I pressed record on my phone's voice memo app, replayed what I remembered, and narrated every word back to myself while it was still fresh. I saved the file. I didn't know yet exactly what I would do with it, but I knew I was done waiting for someone else to decide when my story was worth telling. What my family didn't know was this: that small life they pitied had been quietly reaching hundreds of thousands of people for years. My blog had grown into something I never planned and never expected. The pen name I wrote under had a following that most published authors would envy. I wrote about ICU nursing. I wrote about the psychology of being overlooked in a family that only celebrates certain kinds of success. I wrote about what it costs you to keep loving people who have decided you're not worth the trouble, and people responded, not in dozens, in hundreds of thousands. A major healthcare media publisher had reached out 6 months earlier, asking if I would turn the blog into a book. I had signed the contract quietly. The advance had landed in my bank account. My family had no idea any of it existed. Here is the part that still makes me catch my breath when I think about it. My father shared one of my posts on his own Facebook page about a year before all of this. He wrote in the caption, "Whoever writes this really understands family pain." He had no idea it was his daughter. I took a screenshot. I saved it. I said nothing. I had a plan they never saw coming. Not revenge, something better than that. The truth, told in my own words in a room they couldn't control or edit or spin into something that made them look good. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out years ago. What was left was something quieter and much more certain. I was ready. The person who helped me get there was someone I had known for years without fully realizing how much she saw in me. Dr. Renata Osei had been an ICU physician at my hospital for over 20 decades. She was the kind of woman who spoke in full, considered sentences and never wasted a single one. She had watched me go from a nervous new nurse who triple-checked every chart to one of the most trusted care coordinators in the entire system. One afternoon, she sat across from me in the break room and started reciting a paragraph from a post I had written about what nurses carry home after a hard shift. She said it almost word for word. I felt my face change before I could stop it. She looked at me steadily and said, "That's you, isn't it?" I nodded. She didn't make a big moment of it. She just said, "Then it's time to stop hiding it." Dr. Osei was the one who connected me with the right people at the publisher. She read every draft. She sat with me through the contract negotiations. She was the person I trusted most, and she was there the day everything finally came into the open. While I was building, my father was still talking. The aunt told me he had been telling extended family for years that I had abandoned them, that I was unstable, that my choices had isolated me from the people who loved me. The family had accepted that version of me the way people accept a story when no one contradicts it. My brother had his own role in keeping that story alive. Someone who attended a family reunion told me he had said in front of a group of relatives, "Callie always wanted to be the victim. Some people just choose that life." They thought they had already won. They thought I was somewhere in Denver, alone and regretful, living small and quietly coming apart. My book had a release date. My real name was going on the cover. The dedication page read, "For everyone whose family called their strength a failure." My father was about to find out who he had texted 12 years ago. I didn't plan to be in the hospital. Nobody plans it. I came in with severe abdominal pain on a Tuesday morning, and within hours I was in surgery for an emergency appendectomy. Serious enough to keep me overnight, not serious enough to scare me. I was recovering in the same hospital where I had spent years taking care of other people. There was something quietly strange about being the one in the bed. Dr. Osai was there. She had come by after her shift, not as my physician, just as the person who knew me best. She sat in the chair near the window, and we talked in low voices, the way people do in hospital rooms, like the walls deserve a little privacy too. I don't know exactly how my father found out. The aunt, I think. She had always kept one foot in both worlds. Somehow she knew I was there, and somehow she told him, and he came. He walked into my room without calling first. I heard the door before I saw him. When I looked up, he was standing in the entrance in a collared shirt, and he looked older than I expected. He also looked prepared, like he had rehearsed something on the drive over. Dr. Osai stood up slowly from her chair, but didn't leave. My father looked at her briefly, then at me. He said, "I heard you were sick. I came because you're still my daughter." I looked at him for a moment, then I said, "You came because someone told me I was vulnerable. That's different." His jaw tightened. He stepped closer and started talking. He called the past a rough patch. He said he had been under enormous pressure during those years. He said we had both made mistakes and that it was time to put it behind us. I didn't raise my voice. I reached for my phone on the bedside table and opened my messages. I scrolled to a screenshot I had kept for 12 years. I turned the screen toward him so he could read it clearly. "Don't bother coming home. We've moved on. This family has no room for failures." I didn't say anything. I just held it there. He looked at it. He looked away. He started to speak again, something about context, about how things were complicated back then. Dr. Osai stepped forward and placed a book on the tray table beside my bed. The cover was face up. My name was printed clearly across the bottom. My father stopped talking. He picked it up slowly, the way you pick something up when you're not sure yet what it is. He read the title, he turned it over. Then he opened to the first page and found the dedication. The room was completely quiet. The hum of the hospital, the distant sound of a cart in the hallway, the soft beeping from the monitor near my bed, all of it felt very far away. I spoke. My voice was steady. "I built everything you said I couldn't. I wrote about every year you decided I wasn't worth keeping. And the people who read it, hundreds of thousands of them, they know exactly what kind of strength looks like a small life from the outside." My father's face did something I had never seen it do. It didn't go hard, it didn't go defensive. It crumbled. Not loudly, just a slow collapse, the kind that comes when a person finally runs out of the story they've been telling themselves. He sat down in the chair near the bed. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once. He said he had been wrong and that he had known it for a long time and hadn't known how to come back from it. I let him finish. I didn't interrupt. I didn't soften it for him or make it easier. When he was done, I said, "I forgive you, but forgiving you doesn't mean I'm coming home." He nodded. He stood up. He looked at me once more, and then he walked out of the room. Dr. Osai reached over and squeezed my hand. I looked out the window. The sky outside was a plain, ordinary blue. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to cry about. There was just stillness, and it felt earned. The book came out 3 months later. It found its readers quickly and quietly, the way honest things do. It became a bestseller in healthcare communities and in spaces where people talk about family estrangement, about survival, about building something real after someone tells you you can't. The aunt called me a few weeks after the release. She said my father had bought a copy. She said he kept it on his nightstand. She said he hadn't talked about it much. My brother sent me a text. It was long and careful and measured, full of phrases that sounded more like a legal disclaimer than an apology. I read it once and put my phone down. I didn't respond. My mother called. She cried for almost 20 minutes straight. I listened. I didn't hang up. I didn't collapse into her either. I was warm and I held a boundary at the same time, and I had not always known those two things could live together in one moment, but they can. I went back to Denver, back to the ICU, back to the mornings that begin with coffee I make myself in my own kitchen, in my own apartment, in the life I constructed from nothing but stubbornness and time. The day I stopped waiting for my father's permission to be proud of myself was the day I stopped being his daughter and started being my own. If a parent ever made you feel like you were too much trouble to keep, I see you. Subscribe and tell me in the comments, what did you build after they walked away? Your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Click hype to help this story reach every person who is still healing from those words. Your story has power. If you felt a connection to mine, please subscribe and share your journey in the comments. Every hype you give this video helps empower someone else. Thank you for being here and for listening.